We're going to talk about Joseph Nathan Oliver, better known as Joe Nathan Oliver, or Joe Oliver, or King Oliver. Yeah, he was the king of jazz at one point in his life. Born in 1881, somewhere near Donaldsonville, Louisiana, out in the sticks somewhere that is. He moved to New Orleans at an early age, and his first love in the musical area was the trombone. That was his first instrument. He played that for a number of years and then lost favor with it and switched to the cornet. That became the love of his life. He stayed with it for the rest of his musical career. Between the years 1908 and say 1917, he was playing around New Orleans in brass bands, in orchestras, and of course he was playing in the bars and other establishments in Storyville. Of course, all that ended when Storyville closed in 1917. Joe Oliver at that time was playing in a band with Kid Ory. Put in his notice, and he moved to Chicago to relaunch his career. Upon doing that, he suggested a young kid take his place, whose name just happened to be Louis Armstrong. That relationship will continue for the rest of their lives. While in Chicago, Joe Oliver put together an outstanding band and was playing all the ballrooms and bars and nightclubs and venues he possibly could. He started recording on several different labels. And somewhere around 1921, 22, he got the itch to travel, and so he moved to the West Coast, where there was a budding jazz scene. He only stayed up there for 1 year with his band and decided that Chicago was a much better scene for him, so he turned around and returned to Chicago in 1922. By that time, Kid Ory is moving out to the West Coast, and Louis Armstrong is just hanging around New Orleans doing nothing. So pretty soon, Joe Oliver is expanding his band in Chicago and invites a young Louis Armstrong to join him, and that's a history that we know all too well. Joe Oliver was also a very, very fine composer. Pieces like Diplomat Blues, Canal Street Blues, or pieces that were written by him. He, upon expanding his band, decided that he had to write out arrangements for the instrumentalists so that some people would actually solo on top of those. So he is also one of the first jazzmen to use written arrangements in his jazz performances. Of course, you know the story of Louis Armstrong departing the band and creating his Hot 5 and Hot 7, along with his wife, Lil Hardin. And that's another history, of course. It took place about the time that Joe Oliver was trying to expand himself into New York. Joe was not the best businessman, great musician, but not a great businessman. A lot of his managers stole from him and robbed him blind. He would overplay his hand in negotiations. He lost a job at Savoy Ballroom for asking for too much money, Savoy Ballroom. And then when offered the opportunity to open up the brand new Cotton Club, he once again overplayed his hand. The club refused him and instead hired a very young Duke Ellington. And we know how that history went. Unfortunately for Joe, we had the economy crashing. The bank that held all of his life savings in Chicago went belly up. He lost all of his money, and somewhere a few years later, he was stranded in Savannah, Georgia, where he sold his trumpet, sold all of his fine suits, started selling fruits on the side of the road, eventually became a janitor, became increasingly ill, could not pay for medical treatment, and died all too young. A group of musicians in New York, along with his sister, paid to have his body shipped from Savannah, Georgia to New York City, and they arranged a very nice funeral for him, befitting of the King of Jazz, and he is buried in Woodlawn Cemetery due to the respect and generosity of the young musicians who followed him and still proclaimed him king despite the downturn in his luck and fortune. Joe Oliver pioneered the use of mutes and created the term we call wah-wah, where he used a small metal mute called a pixie made by Kahn with a rubber plunger and created that wah-wah sound that we find Wycliffe Gordon uses today. That was created by Joe Oliver. Not just a technique, but the name wah-wah as well. So any of you guitar players who use a wah-wah pedal, you owe King Oliver for that too. Okay, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Joe Nathan Oliver. King Oliver to us all. Thank you very much.